it's not the same kind of escapism as like science fiction where you're transported to a different world and you're living a different life. The escapism in these books is more down to earth.
It's in the mundane, right?
It's in the mundane, yeah. So it's finding some sort of magic within your own regular everyday life. And the escapism is more about how you choose to live your life.
Yes. So it feels a little bit more accessible. You know, there's something to be said about escapism when you read about fantasy stories with dragons and wizards. But there's that sense of, well, okay, it only exists in my head. But with these, you kind of almost live these people's stories and you kind of can apply it to your own life as well.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Tales of Our Times. This is a show where we discuss the stories that move us, what makes them so meaningful, and why others could or should find meaning in them as well. This is not a spoiler-free show, so bear that in mind as you continue to listen. We tackle books, movies, podcasts, games, and more. Where there's a story, there's a reason to read, or however else you choose to relax for today's episode, because this is actually a Takes of Our Time episode where instead of discussing a single story, we're going to be looking at a trend in reading in the last, 5 years? Longer? I'm getting like nods from my guests in the room. So let me just introduce them. We're going to be discussing the trend of cozy literature, and to help me dissect this, I've invited two of my coziest friends and also avid readers, Kat Trites and Bonnie Yuen. Welcome back, you guys.
Hi.
So let's talk about cozy literature then. We're going to start here. This came up because of a conversation that we all started having in a coffee shop, perhaps one of the most common settings we just discussed for a cozy literature book. How would you guys define a cozy book, specifically for this genre of like a cozy lit book?
I feel like the ones that I have experience with, at least, they're all a little bit whimsical and escapist. So they all start with normal, regular people, and there's something magical about each of the stories.
There's also, besides the coziness of it, there's also a sense of either nostalgia or like a wistfulness behind the scenes. So within the comfort, there's a little bit of a thread of almost sadness that runs through it, and how people kind of overcome that at the end of the story.
Kind of like a bittersweet flavor, maybe?
Yes, a little bit.
It feels kind of like an actionable level of escapism.
Yes.
Where you're like, maybe I can't go into this magic coffee shop, but I too can try to take control of my life and talk to my overbearing parents or whatever the problem is in this case.
Exactly, yeah.
And so to that end, I think also the magic as well tends to be sort of like a magical realism. But like we're taking one little aspect of life and we're changing it to be more magical. Does that feel right to you guys?
Yes.
Yes.
To some extent.
I have read some, though, that have very little magic or none whatsoever. So it does span.
It's not contingent on magic.
And I think my understanding of magical realism doesn't quite align with these in the same way. In one of the books, they talk about having dreams. So, like, if you're imagining this thing happening to you as a dream, then, yeah, it's possible.
Okay.
You know, whereas, like, you're not actually going to go stumble into a coffee shop where cats talk.
Shame.
In actual rats. Unfortunately. For all of us, I think we'd enjoy that. But
all of our great shame. So cozy literature then at this point is like a book that gives you a warm feeling, maybe has some sort of magical element, and tends to focus on perhaps very personal stories and actionable escapism.
Yes, and I think the setting is really important too in these stories. Because you're saying coffee shop. Many of these stories that I've read take place in places that we tend to think of as cozy places.
Yeah, let's speak more to that. So you also mentioned, Bunny, that you said you've seen a lot of similarities between these. And I think I even remember, like, at one point when we first had this idea for this episode, like the three of us were making a checklist of like things that we found in cozy books. I noticed that a lot of the literature I have seen that's at least written in English but available in Taiwan comes from Japan or South Korea. I think there are probably some Taiwanese written books, but they just I haven't seen them translated yet.
I haven't seen those in English.
Yeah. So what similarities have you noticed between these kind of books?
Cats.
Cats, yes. There's usually cats involved of some sort. Coffee shops are an overwhelming theme.
Yeah. Places with books. There are both bookstores and libraries in these.
I also feel like there's an overall theme of like connection between people. A lot of the stories result with somebody realizing that their problem can be solved if they just reach out to somebody else.
That's true.
Or if they strengthen their relationship with their family or something like that. So I feel like connection is a huge
Absolutely.
theme.
That's a really good observation, actually.
Thank you.
So then let's move on to some examples of cozy books that you guys have.
All right, I'll start with one. It is a Japanese book, and it's called What You're Looking For Is in the Library. I found this one to be interesting because I love libraries. There's something about the smell of old books.
Libraries themselves are just kind of magical in
Yeah.
their own little way.
It's that soft comfort of like a quiet, peaceful room where you can get that old book smell and everybody's going to be very helpful.
There is a librarian at this library that helps you and suggests some books for you. And one of them will be something unexpected.
Yeah.
And that unexpected book will help solve one of your life's problems.
I love it. A cat actually knows a book owner that almost does exactly this.
Really? Yeah. Oh
a
my gosh,
real life
that's
book
amazing.
owner.
Yeah, this is where I'm saying, like, you can kind of think of it as magic realism, but is it though?
But maybe magic is not a necessity. Magic is like a possible implication in some of these.
Right, like how does she do it?
How does she know?
Maybe magic, maybe not.
Maybe she's just really insightful.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because every book that the librarian suggests to these patrons is a book in real life. And so what ends up is you end up Googling these books because they truly exist and you can check them out at your own library.
So you can follow the librarian's recommendations.
Yes.
That's so fun. All right, so Kat, what's a book that you have noticed?
So the one that I have enjoyed the most so far is We'll Prescribe You a Cat.
I bought this book for somebody.
I know. It's very good. And the premise is that each of the stories, there's 4 different stories within the book.
It's a collection of small
stories. It's a collection of them. Each of them begin with someone who's looking for a mental health clinic. And they stumble across this place where they think this is a mental health clinic, and it kind of becomes more clear across the book that it's not. But the doctor inside the clinic prescribes them a cat that is supposed to help them with their mental health issues. And it works. And it's delightful. And for me, who relates very heavily to cats being good for your mental health, yes, it's very delightful because there are a lot of things that I read as they're saying it, and I'm like, yes, that's correct. So I really enjoy this one too. Yeah.
I guess that also gets to another theme. Not all of these, but a lot of these do tend to be collections of many people coming through the door, and it's like, who will you relate to? Do you relate to all of them? But they're all kind of like little vignettes of people's life,
100%.
like snapshots. So
most of the ones that I've read have been this style.
Okay, so we've covered some examples. We've covered some themes in cozy literature. I guess I want to ask you guys, for me, I just noticed this as like a trend in books, but I think you both read a lot more than I do. And so I guess I have 2 questions, which is like, do you think that this is a new trend in reading, and what might be driving that?
So personally, I think this has been a trend that's been going on in Japan and Korea for a lot longer than the rest of the world has been aware. I think that it's only been recently that we've had translations done, that the Western world has kind of stumbled into it. But I think that it is also a trend that people connect to so strongly that is now spreading into different aspects. So you now have like not only the Japanese and the Korean literature that we've been talking about, but you also have more Western styles that are cropping up, like legends and lattes. Or
say that name again.
Legends and Lattes.
Oh my god.
It's very good. It's a fantasy book.
Okay.
And it is definitely more fantasy rather than like the cozy literature that we're talking about.
The magic realism that we were saying. Same. I've noticed fantasy is actually another one that's been popping up lately, the cozy fantasy. I think that's a later trend than the one that we've been talking about.
The cozy literature.
Yeah.
With the Korean and Japanese authors. I think last year a book came out called Teller of Small Fortunes. That's another one.
I love all these little names. Yeah. They're all giving me little goosebumps of like, I'm so curious. Yeah.
You can't spell treason without T.
Yeah.
So good.
It happened again. I did get little goosebumps. They're all so cute.
They are, yeah.
So perhaps the cozy fantasy is like an evolution of this cozy literature genre that we have that's maybe more grounded. So, Bonnie, you said you've seen that as well. How long have you noticed this kind of trend going on?
For the fantasy?
The cozy literature. Or it could be cozy verging into fantasy as well.
Well, none of us have mentioned this yet.
Yeah, go ahead.
The pandemic, I feel like, really spurred everything on.
Definitely.
A lot of cozy activities in general, I think.
Like self-soothing activities.
Yes, self-care activities. Just have become a lot more popular, a lot more accepted since the pandemic.
Yeah, Bonnie and I were having a conversation about this just the other day as well. We were talking about the different changes in lifestyles that the pandemic brought, where cozy is a lot more common in general, where homesteading is becoming a thing, and like baking bread, the sourdough trend. But those are all kind of comfortable, cozy hobbies.
So perhaps the pandemic is like what got it started. Right. Do you think that is still the driving force, like that kind of lifestyle change that inspired in a lot of people? Or do you think that there are other things that are kind of lending to it? Because what I think when I look at it is that I agree. I think the pandemic definitely like jump started this need for comfort or to escape in a realistic fashion. But I feel like you guys have said as well, it's just kind of continuing to grow and evolve from here. So
how political do you want to go?
Well, do you think it's relevant? I mean, I think that's fine too.
I think that the state of the world in general right now has a lot to do with people's desire to find something comforting. And it's not necessarily just politics. But I do think that, in general, there's so much to worry about. There's climate change happening. There's the politics of everything. There are wars happening right now.
Yeah.
And things that are so out of the norm that are becoming our norm. And we need to find ways to just find that sense of what we think of as normalcy. And these like magical realism books kind of give us something quiet and calm and peaceful in a world that's feeling more and more chaotic.
Another way to look at it outside of politics is I kind of feel like the pandemic made it okay for people to do these things to soothe themselves, even though it's not traditionally something really cool to do. It's not a cool genre of book. And it's almost like the pandemic gave people permission to do these things and think that it's fun or they like it. And so I think people do this and it's being more accepted. Yeah. I think that's part of it as well as the political atmosphere.
Yeah, and maybe in that as well, perhaps this was an awakening of that, like, oh, you like this too. Yeah. Like a moment of connection of like, instead of being this private thing that you would do at home when you were tired or when you were just trying to recharge by yourself. Like I keep coming back to baking bread as like an example, but there's a whole list of things: crocheting, knitting, or like your tea collection that you happen to have, or anything else like that. Like it's made these personal hobbies more of something that you can share with other people.
I was just thinking, because I feel like at least on TikTok or Instagram, there's been a lot of talk about friends who you can decompress with, or like we can sit in a room together and not do anything particularly, and that's still you spending time with that person and like having that connection still, but you're not pressured to do something. All of what you just said kind of made me think of that, where you have those certain people that you can be in a room with and not do anything in particular with, but you still have that friendship and that connection there.
So if cozy literature is like, this is something that people are engaging in because it's an okay way to de-stress, do you find that these kind of books do actually like work to de-stress you, or do help you kind of unwind in a way that sometimes other books don't? Because like I've definitely read books that are like exciting or stress me out or like make me mad even. So do you think that cozy literature accomplishes that job, or is it just like one step on the road?
Weirdly, they almost feel like a therapy session sometimes. Because of the characters in some of these books and the challenges they have to overcome, when they do overcome these challenges, it is kind of emotional. Like it feels a little bit emotional for the reader. And you might want, sometimes, I apply it to my own life or about situations in my own life, and I bawl like a baby. I admit it.
Yeah.
I cried on the train yesterday.
Yeah, okay.
So I'm with you.
I think you're among friends here.
Yeah,
yes.
I definitely agree. I think they are therapeutic.
Yeah, and it's a little bit of a release.
Yeah.
And I don't know exactly why, but it feels good. Is to have that little cry and have it over a book.
Because it's so relatable. I think there's so many moments in some of these books, at least that I've read, and I've been like, oh, yep, I relate to that. I understand where you're coming from there. Even if I don't necessarily relate to the character, I might relate to the specific issue that they're dealing with, or I might relate to their connection with, like, the cat or whoever.
Oh, yeah.
And
then by the end of it, when they overcome whatever they need to overcome, you're just like, and you have that, like,
that release.
And it's still there's still kind of an element of, like, sad to it. But yeah, I think it's the emotional release at the end.
So maybe sometimes, because I know, like, in my own experiences with therapy, I did find it very, like, helpful, but it wasn't always necessarily relaxing. But sometimes it made it easier for me to relax later.
And the eventual tone of all these books, it is hopeful.
Yes.
Right.
So after that release, then comes the hope.
It also goes back to, like, what we said. Not all of them are, like, vignettes or collections, but a lot of them are. So we don't necessarily see the end of all of these stories, but we get the idea that things are going to get better from here at the end of each of these.
Right. And this is what you said. What's that genre called in Japan?
Oh, yeah. It's called healing fiction in Japan. So I love that so much.
It just tickles me so much.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay. Then to wrap up, since we spent so much time talking about these books, do you have one or more than one book or a place you would recommend someone to start if they've listened to this and they're like, yes, I need this emotional release that you guys have been talking about?
I'll start.
Yeah,
Yes,
go ahead.
please, you.
I'll start. The one that started it all for me was called Before the Coffee Gets Cold.
Oh, okay.
And this one definitely has magic in it because you travel back in time. For the duration of one cup of coffee, you can go specifically back in time to a specific day to see what happened at the coffee shop that day. It's a quirky book because there are like 10 different rules that you have to follow in order to go back in time. But you get to follow different characters and their motivations and their reasons for going back. Now, they can never change what happened.
They can just observe.
Yes, they can just observe. But in every instance, going back helps that character move forward in their life in some way. And I believe it's up to 5 books now.
All right, Kat, what are some recommendations from you?
I am going to recommend We'll Prescribe You a Cat.
Yes.
I do really love that one. And then the second one is actually a Korean one. And this one, I can't say for sure that's going to be great because I just started it.
Yeah.
Like this morning.
But, okay. Very recent.
Very recent.
But you already like it enough you want to recommend it.
But I do like it a lot. And it is the Dallergut Dream Department.
Dallergut?
Dallergut. Dallergut Dream Department.
Yeah, what a word.
Yeah. And it's a store that sells dreams. And both people and animals go there to buy their dreams. And you can buy dreams or you can buy nightmares. And the story is told from the perspective of a new employee there. And so she interacts with both the people who create the dreams and the owner of the store, and also all of the clients that come in through the door. So it's kind of cute.
Putting it on hold now at the library.
Bonnie and I both made eye contact as soon as you were like people and animals, and we were like, "Did you get that? She
Buying
spelled it out."
dreams? Yes.
Yes. Oh gosh. Okay. Well, we're all out of time, but thank you both for coming in to kind of describe this, have this conversation with me on air. I've really enjoyed it. I hope that you guys enjoyed it as well.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
It's been fun.
We all got a couple more recommendations for books to go check out. And thank you to you out there, listeners. I hope that this conversation has left you feeling inspired, perhaps hopeful that maybe you too can find a book in the future that will lend you this catharsis. But for now, we'll see you next time. And thank you for listening. This has been Tales of Our Time on Radio Taiwan International. This was a Takes of Our Time episode where we discussed cozy literature and the trends in Taiwan. Next week will be our 2nd year anniversary, and we'll be doing a mailbag episode. So if you have any questions that you'd like me to check out, you can send them to stephea@rti.org.tw. We'll see you next time.